like to start our symposium. My name is Alexander Maciej Jabłoński. I am president of Oskar Halecki Institute in Canada, and I would like to welcome all of you to this special evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Dobry wieczór Państwu.
I have a great pleasure to welcome all of you to the second Oskar Halecki Symposium organized by the Oskar Halecki Institute in Canada in cooperation with the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw, Poland, and the World Research Council on Poles Abroad. This symposium is organized with kind support and patronage of the Senate of Republic of Poland, with help of other organizations and foundations, private persons, and all of you. The topic of this symposium is Polish Canadians' contribution to Canada, commemorating 150th anniversary of this beautiful land. We all remember how we crossed for the first time Atlantic Ocean in search of a new life in this beautiful country. Our symposium is a tribute to thousands of Poles and others who cross and still crossing the Atlantic in search for freedom and better perspectives. We remember all of them, and we thank the Almighty God for their hard work in Canada, for their lives full of toil, sacrifices, and sometimes tears. We feel, however, that our lives are fulfilled to the great extent in Canada, that we were given an equal opportunity, and we live lives here full of dignity, thanks to Canadians and this welcoming country. I would like to welcome our guest of honor, His Excellency Dr. Andrzej Kurnicki, new ambassador of the Republic of Poland to Canada. His spouse, Madame Agata Wrzoł-Kurnicka, she's not present, but I think she will come tomorrow. Our good friend, Councillor Rick Ciarelli, representing City of Ottawa. And unfortunately, Mr. Władysław Lizoń will be with us tomorrow. He is the president of Canadian-Polish Congress from Toronto. I warmly welcome representatives of diplomatic and consular corps in the national capital, as well as members of various Canadian institutions. I welcome warmly Oblate Fathers of Mary Immaculate, along with our pastor from the Polish parish of St. Hyacinth. I welcome Canadians working together with us in such important projects, the Black Ribbon Day. I think we have some representatives, especially from Belarusian community. I think this is yours.
So this is our second symposium already, and this symposium series is dedicated to the memory of Professor Oskar Halecki, the outstanding Polish and American historian, a multilinguist, diplomat, author of several books and publications. Professor Halecki, at the age of 30, co-founded and was elected Secretary of the League of Nations Committee on Intellectual Cooperation. Oskar Halecki was also the author of the first concept of intermarium that was supposed to unite Central Eastern European countries. Should this idea have succeeded, we wouldn't have had the Second World War caused by Nazi Germany and Soviet Union. Tens of millions of human lives would have been spared. I now warmly welcome all our presenters and distinguished speakers, including Reverend Professor Romuald Gliński, who represents the rector of the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University. Father Provincial of all Polish Oblates, Reverend Professor Paweł Zając. Reverend Professor Mirosław Różański from Warsaw. Reverend Professor Wojciech Kowal. Professor Kazimierz Braun from Buffalo, New York. Professor Marek Jan Chodakiewicz from the Institute of World Politics in Washington, D.C. We have with us Brigadier General Dr. Robert Williams from Kingston, Ontario. Welcome. We welcome also speakers of all other sessions, especially from the Polonia Institute in California, the Association of Polish Engineers in Canada, the Polish Society of Arts and Sciences in London, England, and from the Canadian Polonia Institute for Historical Studies from London, Ontario, who brought with them the exhibition that you can see in the adjacent room. So welcome. I welcome all of you, including students, who joined us here tonight for this very special occasion, the second Oskar Halecki Symposium dedicated at this 150th anniversary of Canada to the contribution of Polish Canadians to our country, Canada. Now, I would like to invite distinguished guests for the opening plenary. His Excellency, Dr. Andrzej Kurnicki, the Ambassador of the Republic of Poland for Canada. Prosimy o słowo z Polski.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizer, Polish community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Madame, Messieurs, Szanowni Państwo. Very briefly, if I may start with some history of the Polish settlers in Canada, having been lately introduced to the so-called Manitoba first settlers, and they celebrate a week ago 200 years of University of the Settlers in Manitoba. And I've been over there for a few days. There was a great event in local or provincial parliament, distinguished guests, premier, ministries, as well as the member of the parliament. And many of them are being in Polish descent. And also very active in political life, social life, cultural life in Manitoba. And there is a beautiful story about these Manitoba settlers, Polish, because they arrived to Canada as we call maybe the prison of war. After the Napoleon was defeated by the British mainly, but also the Russians, a lot of Polish soldiers proudly served under the Napoleon army was taken as a prison of war, and they give the chance to leave Europe and go to the Canada. So many of them joined the British army, not because they want to fight for freedom of Britain, but there was no choice. And a lot of them, hundreds of them, maybe even thousands of them, come to, with British, I would say, command to Canada. And also find a very interesting story, because some of them joined the Quebecian army or the French army. So some of the Poles fighting with the British against the French in Quebec, some of the fights with the French against the British. The story about the Manitoba settlers is quite interesting, because in 1816, Lord Selkirk, if I recall and pronounce rightly, he selected few well-trained soldiers, and mainly with the Polish descent, and he selected based on the their experience as a soldier, but also there is a statement written in English to the officers saying, choose the Poles because they're only not good soldiers, they will be good settlers, but also they're good farmers. All of them, we know the name, 10 of them, being also the personal bodyguard of Lord Selkirk. And 2 of them, I find, not been historically proved, serve also as a bodyguard to the Napoleon 2nd or 7th Regiment in Europe, under the Poniatowski Regiment. Some of you recall the Regiment Poniatowski a year before the war in Napoleon collapsed completely. Poniatowski and his regiment served very closely as a bodyguard, personal bodyguard to the Napoleon. So some of them been transferred by the British system to Canada and then fight of freedom, who knows for which freedom. It's a very interesting story. And they arrive after 1 year of a journey from Quebec, mainly from Quebec, to Manitoba, and a few of them settled over there for many years. And then few of them decided to return to Pennsylvania. And quite interesting, particular for me, that I find the roots of some of the Pennsylvania about 30 years ago, that they refer to the Manitoba journey, that some of the relatives or long been the history told, they've been arriving from Manitoba. So I was very surprised why they're from Manitoba. And look at this, a few days ago I find why some of the soldiers returned from Manitoba to Pennsylvania, very interesting. And few of them I found around Pittsburgh, okay, around Pittsburgh, yeah. A little bit, they changed a little bit the name to the soldier that we know that joined Lord Selkirk and traveled to Manitoba. Almost the same name, but a little bit different. So great history, and there is a lot of different history attached to the Polish community in Canada. But the first Polish immigrant on record was Dominik Barcz. He came to the Canada in 1752. There we know, he was from Gdańsk, and he traveled to Canada from Gdańsk to Montreal. There was the journey from Gdańsk to Montreal. Gdańsk was also very known for a lot of folks who take this risk and was willing to come to the Canada. Some of the here distinguished participants in this conference know that the first who probably arrived to Canada before Columbus was Jan from Kolno, which is the John from Kolno. For the record, about 50 years before the Christopher Columbus arrived to America. And the record is being done quite extensively. Still, we are not proved precisely if the John of Kolno was selling with Vikings or with Dutch folks, but anyway, he arrived to Canada. We think there will be first Canada, not territory of the United States like today, but Canada was the first, I would say, a country that he stopped and pursue this journey further. The next one was, we know in 1757 was the Charles Blaskowitz, a deputy general of lands. He arrived in 1776 as an army surgeon. And then was the Globensky. Okay, Globensky also arrived a few years after as one of the members of the British, if I will call, Geraspola. His grandson, Charles August Maximilian Globensky, was elected to the House of Commons in Ottawa in 1875. So I was the first person elected to the very distinguished body of politics here in Ottawa. So that's sort of story related to the first, who not only joined and came to the Canada as soldiers, but also being very active in political life. Among the earliest Polish immigrants to Canada were members of the so-called Buron military regime from Saxony, Switzerland. They came with the British Army to the North America. So the whatever regime was mainly located around Quebec City, if I recall precisely. Okay, that is the group, the second group, if I recall, the travel to Manitoba, like a second settlers after the first one. In 1841, the Kazimierz Stanisław Gzowski arrived to Canada from the Poland to United States. That's what we call. And for 50 years worked in the engineering, military, and community sector around Toronto and Southern Ontario, for which he was knighted by the Queen Victoria. His grandson, Peter Gzowski, became one of the Canada famous radio personalities. So we have not only soldiers, politicians, but also we have some folks from entertainment, I would say, sector, also very important. It's still a lot of Polish around Canadian Montreal being involved in entertainment and music. If I may also The next one is the Charles Horecki, immigrant from 1872. He was the engineer with the cross-Canada railway constructions from Edmonton to the Pacific Ocean through the Peace River Valley to the mountain and the body of water in British Columbia are named after him. So also engineers arrived. So there are a lot of soldiers, entertainment, musicians, engineers, and also a lot of people involved in politics. So later they came as a politician, very influential politician in Canada. Maybe not as much like the Ukrainian diaspora, having a lot of representation on the provincial level as well as the federal level, but still very active, some of them still in politics. One of also very important group of settlers was the Kashubian from northern Poland, and I find some very interesting story in Jastarnia, which is the part of the Kashubian, a small town located to the Baltic Sea, and it's still people talking about how many years ago few of the Kashubian left Jastarnia in Kuźnica, a small town around the peninsula, Baltic Peninsula, left the Poland for new opportunity in Canada. So there is a story among older generation in Jastarnia talking about how this few Kashubian from Jastarnia left Poland and joined Canada. So it's something unique. This story has not been written, that's very important. So been passed from generations to the generation. So it's quite interesting, okay? Never been written in any books or any article or any research been done as a result of how many Kashubian left Kashubian and then come to the Canada as a diaspora. I want to, because it seems to me the time is almost finished, I just want to briefly only to touch some basic about the Polish community. We think that in the Polish community is around, in terms of number, between 800,000 to 1.2 million of very active Polish community in Canada, mainly around Toronto. Okay, the center of culture of Poland in Montreal, of Polish diaspora, was located in Montreal, but then later to the process of aging these populations, much more activity being done around the Toronto area than in Montreal. Manitoba, in Alberta, is very also active, one of the center of the Polish diaspora in Canada. Vancouver also lately been very active in provincial as well as the federal government level. We have also few business. That's also very important for Canada. A lot of Polish with the engineering background open a fantastic business. And I met yesterday Andrew Sohai, who is the owner, privately owned corporation that been supply very, I would say, not only military sensitive, but aerospace sensitive equipment to Bombardier, to Airbus, as well as to the Boeing. He created the business today, very proud of the business, employed 850 people in Canada, and also very important for us, particularly if I represent the government of Poland, or head of the state, that he, few months ago, opened also the business in Poland, in Kraśnik, and he also will produce mainly for EU, for European. This business under the CETA is very open, so there is a few business done. A very successful Polish representative of the Polish community, Polish diaspora, Canada. But I would say in terms of the structure of the education, mostly it is dominated, the diaspora, by the engineers, if I recall. I'm correct, yes? Yeah? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's good. So we find a lot of in Toronto, particularly in aerospace business as well as the autocar or automotive machinery. So we're very proud of the Polish community, cultural development as well as the economic development. I spoke with many officials on the federal as well as the government level, and all of them stress how productive and how important is the Polish diaspora for Canadian economy, for Canadian culture, for Canadian music, as well as in high tech. We are very been engaged in high technology research. A lot of been done in aerospace also. So Polish diaspora is very active in all this sector in Canadian politics, life, business as well, education. We're very proud, and still we hope that with this, I would say, the relations being continuous, and the Polish community will be very productive to the Canadian economy and to Canadian politics life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Now I would like to invite Councillor Rick Chiarelli, who is representing the City of Ottawa, to say a few words to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Fortunately, I'm losing my voice, so that's fortunate for you. This is Canada's 150th anniversary, and to Polish people, that's not such a high number, but to people who aren't aware of countries that have just celebrated their 1,050th anniversary, it seems like a big deal. The City of Ottawa is very proud of the contributions that different communities have made to Canada. And as I remember reading the history of Polish immigration to Canada, and they talk about waves of immigration, but as I looked at it, each wave began with 1 year, ended with another, and began with that. The next one began with that very same year, ended with another, which then began with that very same year. And so a wave, 4 or 5 waves that include every single year, is more like a stream. And I think the stream of Polish migration to Canada is something that's continued to affect and enrich the country every single year. And as we heard earlier, before there were hardly any other European-based people in Canada. Former Mayor Mary Pitt has announced to me a couple of times that I am now an honorary Polish citizen. And and I know she couldn't be here tonight, but of course would have wanted to be. But it's interesting to know that just how much the critical mass of the Canadian communities changed in just the past several years. When I was first elected, I was a teenager, youngest person in Canada elected. And across Canada, in the various newspapers, it would say, Ottawa elects teenager. Teenager elected in Ottawa, from Vancouver to St. John's, Newfoundland. But in Ottawa, it said, Nepean elects ethnic. So, because I'm Italian, well, I'm supposed to be Polish, but I'm Italian. So Nepean, to that point, had only ever elected white Anglo-Saxon male members of council. That was all there ever were. So I got elected, and before you knew it, we had a Polish woman as the mayor, and this was a shock to many people in Nepean. And she was a good mayor, and then went on. Actually, I think she's had more impact on the community since she left the mayoralty than even when she was in it, or before that when she was the chief of staff to former Mayor Ben Franklin. And anyway, I think the City of Ottawa is very proud of the 150th anniversary, and very proud of the contributions that the Polish community has made to the fabric of Ottawa. And I think with the Polish people and the Italian people, we've created some good sense here in Ottawa, and it's an important part of where we drive our community. So I hope this symposium helps fill that out, flesh that out for everyone in attendance, and I will be in and out of it at different times. So thank you. And also I want to thank Dr. Jablonski for inviting me here and for letting me be part of several of the Polish community's events over the past couple of years. Thank you.
Grazie mille. Chancellor. So right now I will be reading two letters. So one is from the Senate of Republic of Poland. It was written by Stanisław Karczewski, who is the Speaker of the Senate. So the letter is in Polish, so we will not translate it into English at this time. Szanowny Panie Prezesie, dziękuję za zaproszenie na konferencję poświęconą osiągnięciom społeczności polonijnej w Kanadzie, podsumowującą 150-lecie obecności Polskiej Grupy Narodowej w państwie kanadyjskim. Z przykrością zawiadamiam, że mój udział w sympozjum w tym terminie nie jest możliwy. Jestem przekonany, że konferencja będzie okazją do omówienia najistotniejszych osiągnięć Polonii kanadyjskiej, a także upowszechnienia ojczystej kultury, historii i nauki w kraju osiedlenia. Zapewniam, że Senat Rzeczypospolitej Polskiej, który jest kontynuatorem zapoczątkowanej w okresie międzywojennym opieki nad Polonią i Polakami za granicą, najlepiej jak może wypełnia obowiązki podjęte w obszarze współpracy ze środowiskami polonijnymi i polskimi w świecie. Ufam, że Państwa wiedza i doświadczenie będą pomocne w dyskusji nad właściwym miejscem, a także przyszłością i perspektywami rozwoju polskiej myśli na kontynencie amerykańskim, co było przedmiotem troski i wieloletniej aktywnej działalności profesora Oskara Haleckiego, wybitnego historyka, polskiego patrioty, patrona Instytutu Naukowego w Ottawie. Doceniając pracę Instytutu Naukowego imienia Oskara Haleckiego w Kanadzie oraz Światowej Rady Badań nad Polonią, składam życzenia owocnych obrad oraz dalszych sukcesów w obszarze rozwoju nauki polskiej na obczyźnie. Z poważaniem, Stanisław Karczewski. And the second letter is coming from the World Research Council on Poles Abroad from Florida, signed by Walter Wiesław Gołębiewski, who is the president. Szanowny Panie Prezesie, serdecznie dziękuję za zaproszenie mnie do udziału w drugim sympozjum imienia profesora Oskara Haleckiego w Ottawie. Niestety, z przyczyn ode mnie niezależnych nie mogę uczestniczyć w drugim sympozjum. Ten pan obecny był na pierwszym sympozjum. Pragnę jednak przekazać serdeczne gratulacje na ręce pana prezesa oraz dla całego komitetu organizacyjnego drugiego sympozjum za wielki wysiłek związany z organizacją tak ważnego naukowego spotkania przedstawicieli z Polski, Stanów Zjednoczonych i Kanady. Cieszy mnie bardzo, że tematem drugiego sympozjum jest działalność naukowa oraz polityczno-społeczna tak wybitnego Polaka, historyka, politologa, jakim był profesor Oskar Halecki. Jego pozycja naukowa i poglądy polityczne sprawiły, że w okresie swojego życia stał się przedstawicielem środowisk intelektualnych i politycznych Stanów Zjednoczonych i Kanady w takich sprawach jak potrzeba odbudowy państw Europy Środkowo-Wschodniej oraz stosunków z Rosją. Jego postulaty polityczne i społeczne są szczególnie aktualne w obecnych czasach. Życzę wszystkim uczestnikom drugiego sympozjum owocnych obrad i wszelkiej pomyślności w pracy naukowej i w życiu osobistym. Z poważaniem, Walter Wiesław Gołębiewski. So thank you for your attention. Right now, let's pass to the next point on our program, which will be the opening lecture. Dr. Andrzej Maciej Jabłoński is the president of Oskar Halecki Institute in Canada and co-chair of this symposium. He manages the assembly integration and testing development at the David Florida Laboratory, the National Space Qualification Facility at the Canadian Space Agency in Ottawa. Dr. Jabłoński is also the adjunct research professor in the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Carleton University. For many years, he is a volunteer in the Polish-Canadian organizations, first in the United States and since 1982 in Canada. Now, Dr. Aleksander Maciej Jabłoński will present to us his reflections on Polish Canadians on Canada's 150th anniversary. Let's welcome Dr. Maciej Jabłoński. Panie doktorze, prosimy.
His Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, drodzy przyjaciele. In the present day, Polish-Canadian constitute an important group in the Canadian mosaic. According to 2011 census by Statistics Canada, there were about over 1 million Canadians who claim full or partial Polish ancestry. This is an increase in comparison with 2006 census. Less than 20% of them list the Polish language as a mother tongue, and not all of them were necessarily born in Poland. The history of the Polish group and its dynamics is fascinating and depends almost solely on situation, tragic events, and deep transformations in the old country, in our first homeland. There are many reasons for immigration, among them economical, political, and religious, but also large-scale conflicts like wars, prosecution, and human rights violation. One might consider immigration as a symbol of modern times, and it started with high intensity to North America at the end of the 19th century, and it continues to the present days. Poland experienced very turbulent times during the last 250 years of her history. Poland was completely removed from the map of Europe in 1795, after the so-called Third Partition by Prussia, Russia, and Austria. The 19th century was a time of several uprisings against foreign oppressors, especially against Russian Empire. Each occupied territory of Poland had a very different and complex situation. The immigration of Poles from the occupied territories by three powers took place after each uprising. In my presentation, I will present my own reflections on Polish Canadians. I will say a few words about Poles before Confederation, and then present some comments on 5 waves of Polish immigration from 1870 to the beginning of this century. I will present an overview of the current situation and make some introduction of the symposium structure. I like to state it, what was the source, because many people try to uncover, what was the reason that I decided to organize this symposium together, of course, with a group of the people, enthusiasts, and so on. But last year I was invited for a special conference in Poland, which was organized under auspices of the Senate of the Republic, together with Stefan Wyszyński University. And in foyer, I met one of a professor who is present here, Reverend Professor Gliński. And he told me, dear doctor, maybe we can organize something together. And there's the upcoming 150th anniversary of Canada. Maybe we can put something together. Now we decided to put, with great difficulty, some problems, smaller and bigger, and I'm very thankful to him that he mentioned to me. And I together with a group of other enthusiasts, we decided to push it through. I think I almost finished with introduction, and I like to say, before I say some words about Poles before Confederation, I like to say a few words about Canada. A few years ago, when I was very sick, I decided to publish several papers, and one of the papers was a paper about Canada. It was published in Poland by Professor Jan Żaren, who couldn't come here for this symposium. Unfortunately, I talked to him just 2 days ago. But I'm thankful to him that he published this paper about Canadian Confederation. And I studied for about 3 months and reached to the archives to get some nice photographs. As we all remember, Canada has been created by the British North America Act on July 1st, 1867, which was signed after 3 conferences in Charlottetown, Quebec City, and finally in London, England. There were 36, the so-called Fathers of Confederation. None of them were Polish. 3 of them had a profound impact on the creation of what we now call Canada. You can see here on this slide George Brown, Sir Georges Etienne Cartier, and Sir John Macdonald. Canadian Confederation was based on the compromise between two founding British and French nations. I like to stress it, that everything should be based on some kind of compromise. That's why we have Canada in the present form, because this was compromised. First one, George Brown, a Scot by birth, was a founder and first editor-in-chief of Toronto Globe, known now as the Globe and Mail. I'm not reading this newspaper anymore. I used to read Globe and Mail when it was not so much oriented to the liberal zone, but it was always a little bit conservative. He was also a founder of the important Clear Grit Party. And having ideas close to Thomas Jefferson, he liked the full secularization of the state, political representation by all citizens, regardless their class and financial position, reduction of the government spending, and also voluntarism, not working as a volunteer, but voluntarism as a source of the will in dealing in politics, but also in some kind of thinking world. Free election of all government institutions and free trade with the United States. The next one was Sir Georges Etienne Cartier, the special figure. Was a lawyer in Lower Canada. He was a founder of the so-called Parti Bleu, Blue Party. He liked to dismantle an old post-feudal land ownership system in this French province, future Quebec. He opposed the influence of the United States and became more inclined to accept the domination of British. Also, he led the uprising of French against British colonial power in 1837 and took part in so-called Battle of Saint-Denis, lost by French. He escaped at the time to state of Vermont. However, he thought that some kind of a genuine compromise between French and British will lead to building of the strong Canada. And he later joined Sir John Macdonald in his profound work to design of Canadian Confederation. So definitely, Sir John Macdonald was born in Glasgow, very special city in Scotland. He was the most important among 36 fathers of Confederation. The simple and built from stone home of Macdonald is still standing in Kingston, Ontario. He made a peace with his greatest rival, George Brown, and created the so-called Great Coalition and led foundation for creation of the Canadian Confederation, which is our place to be now. This is important to state that from the beginning, Canada was a country of immigrants. However, its foundation was laid down by British and French, and this duality is a cornerstone of the Confederation even at the present time. And let's go right now to Polonia. Word Polonia. On this slide, you have a representation of word Polonia. It's a very complex because it consists of citizens of different countries of Polish origin. The narration about Poland and Polish history and the culture can vary. One factor is very important, is the Polish language. The slide presents distribution of Polonia equally, especially overseas Polonia, which is with respect to European continent throughout the globe. You can see that the largest amount came, of course, to the shores of the United States, then to Brazil. Then we have a lot of Polish Canadians living in Canada, Argentina, Australia, New Zealand, and even South Africa. But no one could say that we have 21 million Poles living abroad, because this will be a huge mistake. Only the small portion of it was born in Poland. They keep some contact with the old country, and this is very important. You have to build on that and try to create strong, feeling among them. What about immigrants' mother tongues in Canada from the last census, which is not fully published? But you can see that, that on the top you have the largest amount of Chinese, Mandarin and Cantonese, then Punjabi, Tagalog, which is Philippines, Spanish, which is due to some immigration from Caribbean and also from South America, Arabic, Italian, still very strong, German. We don't have a huge immigration from Germany right now, so one could say, why is so many people listing German as a first language in census? Or Italian? It means that they have a very strong families, and they continue to use Polish as a first language in their household. However, Russian is increased, and it's right now even more Russian households who use Russian as the first language, and Polish is 13. It was on the 10th position 3 years ago, so we're losing some momentum. Let's hope that that we will help through this kind of meetings. Poles before Confederation was covered very well by Ambassador Kurnicki, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I like to say that in 1812 war, which was a war between Canada and United States, there were a number of Poles, they were already mentioned, and some of them, of course, they were former Napoleon Bonaparte soldiers. They were released from internment camps on the condition that they will join British forces. But some of them, they joined colonial forces in America. So the situation is quite complex about it, and I think we need some more studies. Then I like to mention Alexander Kieszkowski, who was a very prominent figure in Lower Canada, which is right now Quebec, and of course Kazimierz Stanisław Gzowski, and the first Polish settlers, Kashubians in Ontario. There were 5 waves of immigration. The first wave was before the First World War, then the second wave after First World War, because immigration ceased completely during such a great conflict, and Canada took part in it, and we remember all Vimy Monument, how many Canadians died, of course, in fighting in the European continent. The third wave was 1939, 1956. They were tragic years for Poland, and I will say some few words about it, why we have this strong immigration. The fourth wave, very small, very special, 1956 to 1981. We can call it the wave of spies, because many people from this time, they have to sign a collaboration with the communist government in order to be able to visit their families. And they spy on their own families, and they spy also on Canada and the United States. And the fifth wave, it's 1981 to 2000. The first wave, which is the wave which started in approximately 1970, was the largest and belonged to largest immigration from the Polish territories ever happened, mainly of Poles. And it was part of huge immigration from almost all European nations at the end of the 19th century. Poland at the time didn't exist on the map. The main reason for this huge international wave was the opening of many work sites in the fast-built early capitalistic industrial and agriculture centers, in both in the United States and also in smaller scale in newly born Canada. Based on the relatively well-done accounts by immigration authorities and also other estimates, several millions of Poles left their land in search of work. This massive exodus was initially very seasonal in nature, but it grew and involved crossing boundaries of partition land. Later, Poles joined others like Germans, Belgians, Scandinavians, Italians, British, Welsh, Scots, and Irish in crossing Atlantic to both Americas. Based on some estimates, almost 1.2 million Poles emigrated from the territories occupied by Prussia, mainly due to the harsh anti-Catholic policy of Kulturkampf, and seeking also better life conditions. Another 1.3 million left the Russian partition due to the harsh anti-Polish policy of the Tsarist government. And about 1.1 million left so-called Galicia, the part occupied by Austria. The main destination was the United States of America, which absorbed 2.6 million Poles. The German lands in Europe were the destination of about 400,000 Poles, and some remote lands of the Russian Empire took almost 300,000. Other European countries took about 100,000. And other nations of both Americas took about 200,000 only, of which the majority settled in Canada and Brazil. So let's say a few words about the first wave. During the first wave, the largest peak in immigration of Poles was from 1901 to 1910, and it consists of about 73,000, mainly poor farmers. Most of them went to the prairies and settled there. They came together with Ukrainians from Galicia, and they, through enormous hardship, managed to settle and establish farms, especially in Manitoba, initially around Winnipeg, and later also in Saskatchewan and parts of Alberta. This was interrupted almost completely by World War I and resumed in the 1920s. The Canadian government opened the farming of the prairies to immigrants from Europe due to the fact that the first attempts by Canadians themselves, especially through so-called remittance boy arrangements, were highly unsuccessful. And even the British settled in some well-organized fashion, left to the United States or back to Europe, discouraged by harsh climate and unpleasant conditions. Thus, the policy of creation of the so-called gentleman farms collapsed, and even many prejudices could not stop funny-looking and poor immigrants to start farming or Canadian and to some extent even American prairies. Official policy of the government was anti-immigrant. Therefore, they were unfortunately labeled as uneducated, and they, of course, having funny customs and being Catholic and non-Protestant. Most of them knew how to read, write, and how to pray, but in their native languages, which they learned in their distant old country. Polish and Ukrainian immigrants joined forces to ask for church services in their native languages, as it was source of many grievances, not to be under German or Irish priests. Finally, they were forced to be under French hierarchy in the prairies, which was more liberal and understanding of their needs. The Poles were in the lower portion of the social ladder of the Canadian society at the time. Single men work in the working camps, building railways, like you can see here, like others, including East and Central Europeans, Chinese, and representatives of all nationalities from around the world. And you can see here Donald Smith, known better as the Lord of Strathcona, drive the light spike to open Canadian Pacific Railway to BC in Craigellachie on November the 7th, 1985. There's almost some kind of anniversary. And in the front you can see the workers. And the workers, they look like very Slavic. You see engineers dressed better, and this guys in the front, they are Slavs. And they work very hard to open Canada, especially the West. We can say for civilization at the time. The second wave, the immigration almost completely stopped during World War I and resumed in 1918 after Poland regained its independence after a monumental victory over the Soviet Union invasion led by Lenin and Stalin in 1919 and 1920. Initially, the second wave picked up in the 20s to about 47,000, but it was half of the same wave which originated before the war. And then it was disappeared completely in the 30s due to the good stability in the pre-war Poland. Many new workplaces were created, and also because of the high depression wave in America. The second half of this period was characterized by the restriction of immigration due to the depression also in Canada. Poles, together with Ukrainians, became one of the most important groups to open prairies for the modern agriculture, because they could survive. They know how to do the farming around their homes with small veggies, and they know how to survive, and they survive. And they learn these skills back in the home country. The third wave is more tragic. Many of Poles who came to Canada from 1939 to 1945 were channeled through organized efforts of Canadian, British, and the Polish government in exile in London. In 1941 to 1942, 400 Polish engineers and technicians, very high skilled, and about 265 scientists from various fields landed in Canada from Great Britain. The cost of passage through the Atlantic was covered by Polish authorities, and Canadian authorities assured them employment in the fast-built war industry, but also in the Canadian universities, where they created completely new fields unknown before. Canadian universities never before got such an influx of high-caliber scientists, many times of the world class. This deal was prepared by two people, with great help of Victor Podolski, the Consul General of Poland in Ottawa, and later in the wartime, the first Polish ambassador to Canada. And also with great help of Karol Poznański, the Consul General of Poland in London, England. Very interesting figure. The son of a very rich Polish Jewish family from Łódź. The palace of Poznański still exists in Łódź. They were really one of the largest industrialists in the Central Europe at the time. He was very highly skilled and educated person, and he was, of course, getting a high help from Count Kraczynski, who at the same time was ambassador of Poland in London. Both were very skillful Polish diplomats, were also responsive, which is very interesting and unknown to Canadian audience, the granting of 4,000 Canadian entrance visas for Polish Jewish refugees who didn't want to be taken by anybody else. However, with Polish passports, the Canadian government didn't have any option as to accept them. Consul Podolski, towards the end of the war, became the first and at the same time the last, as I mentioned, Polish ambassador to Canada. He was also responsible for the much larger immigration of Polish decommissioned soldiers immediately after the war, and between 1946 to 1947, more than 5,000 former Polish soldiers entered Canada. They were followed by the even larger group of Polish refugees of about 39,000, which arrived between 1947 and 1952. And they were representing almost 25% of all other post-war immigration from Europe to Canada. The Polish-Canadian life started to flourish almost as intensely as before World War I at the beginning of the 20th century. The third wave had many remarkable and famous Polish Canadians. And this was a very highly educated group. Some of them created new departments in many Canadian universities. For example, Professor of Geography, Bogdan Zaborski, he created the departments in Montreal and also at the University of Ottawa. And Bogdan Zaborski was an interesting figure because he managed to escape. My uncle was killed. He knew also Professor Zaborski because he was cartographer and he served in the military cartographic institute. This group they were trying to go to Romania, but they were caught by surprise and they were trying to defend Lvov. General Langer, who made a mistake, he essentially decided to ask all officers, and in this special meeting, he said, what we are going to choose. Are we choosing German occupation or Russian occupation? And they asked him, what do you think, General? And General said, well, I prefer Russian occupation than German occupation. And this was a mistake, because most of them, they later got killed in Katyn. But Bogdan Zaborski managed to escape. Another important figure was Professor of French-Canadian Literature, Paul Wyszynski, or Professor of Psychiatry, Viktor Shirinsky. We managed to get some biographical notes about them, and they are listed on our website. However, the most important person, the symbol of this new immigration wave of Poles, was a young and very smart Polish Air Force and the Royal Air Force fighter pilot and later test pilot, Major Janusz Żurakowski. And as Polish Canadians, we of course know him very well. We managed to see him sometimes because he was still alive. His highest achievement was his participation in the design and development of the unique Avro Aero supersonic jet fighter. He was also the first Canadian pilot to break the sound barrier on December 18, 1952, diving the so-called Seaview CF-100 fighter, the first straight-wing jet aircraft to achieve this type of feat. At the time, he worked as a test pilot in the AV Row Canada company. He successfully flew for the first time the Aral 25201, the newly built supersonic jet fighter. But he decided to give up, and he was only 40 years old when he decided to go for retirement in 1958, as we remember, because of shutting down of the Avro Aero program. Many Canadian engineers, they went to United States. And in the third wave, we have some very special group, aircraft and aviation experts and world-class engineers. And one of them, almost fully forgotten, was Wsewolod Jan Jakimiuk, the Polish engineer of Belarusian origin, who was the son of Orthodox priest. And he completed his studies in Poland, and he worked together with other famous Polish aircraft engineers, and he designed more than 40 planes. But some of these planes he designed for Canada between 1946 and 1948. And during the wartime, he was asked, who you like to be transferred? And they got free visas, and they were transferred by security, including, of course, American security, immediately, without any paperwork, to Canada. Among of them, they were Wacław Czerwiński. We have his beautiful glass work in our church, because when he became very old, he decided also to do some artistic work, and he designed St. Hyacinth stained glass for our church. There were some other engineers, And they are listed on this slide. And on this slide, you can see the so-called immortal plane, which some people, they make a joke about it, and they told me, well, this plane, Alex, this plane looks like a plane for the First World War. What you are doing? You don't know what you are doing. But, you know, this plane is so famous. It's still operational in Canada by many small companies. There is a called Bush plane, and it's used by the US Army as a special liaison type of a small plane, very reliable. Still being used by military and police forces in Scandinavia. I know it because I spent almost 2 years in Finland, and I got many friends who secretly, of course, opposed the Soviet Union, but officially they have to say something else, because this was time during President Kekkonen, which later was found that he collaborated with Russia. But, well, the fourth wave, this was the smallest wave. And this was a very special wave. Once the Iron Curtain was closed in 1948, East Central Europe was completely separated from Western Europe. The movement of people was fully controlled. And despite some liberalization of life in Poland after the so-called October changes in 1956 in Polish Październik and the Soviet invasion of Hungary to destroy the attempt to break out from the Soviet occupation, only a small number of Polish citizens, communist citizens of the so-called Polish People's Republic could travel to the West. The price often had the consequence of becoming a collaborator of the Communist Secret Service, a spy on Polish Canadians, and simply a communist spy in Canada during their temporary stay. They stay with family, at the same time they spy. The size of immigration during the period trickled to a few thousand and included some defections, for example, by athletes and folk dancers. There were a relatively large group of Polish Canadians who couldn't travel or pay a visit to the old country because they were afraid to be arrested, as they openly criticize or participate in the fight against the communist regime, and they were called unbreakable, headstrong. The fifth wave, this was the wave which we belongs. Most of us reaching right now retirement age. They belong to so-called solidarity or post-solidarity wave. And this last wave, which including in the early 80s, the so-called solidarity movement wave, which left Poland during the 13 months of the Freedom Carnival, we were lucky we can count ourselves, my wife and myself, that we left before. So we belong to the earlier wave, but it was the beginning because we left 2 months before Solidarity was born. During the time, a large number of young Poles decided to leave their country, fled to the West, seeking refugee status, and they were stationed in the refugee camps throughout Western Europe, including Italy and Greece. The final number is still unknown, but some estimates suggest that more than 1 million people, Polish people, left Poland. Canada accepted about 80,000, and they got distributed in almost all provinces, but mainly in Ontario, Canadian Prairies, and Alberta. Some of them went to British Columbia, and very little to Atlantic provinces, and some to Quebec. This immigration wave can be divided into 3 main groups. The first group coming before the end of the martial law, the second after martial law got lifted, and until the collapse of the Berlin Wall, and the third group after 1989. The last wave consisted of immigrants who came based on the reunification of families and others seeking a new, better life. The current situation is, there are some good points and some points which are a little bit discouraging. But it's normal because we don't have such a strong immigration to Canada. However, there are many Poles leaving Poland because of the unfortunate political situation and many mistakes made by the former coalition government in Poland. Almost 2.5 million Poles left Poland, especially to the Western Europe. I like to, during my conclusion, I like to mention not Polish-Canadian, but Polish-American researcher, Dr. Danuta Mostwin, known writer, psychologist, sociologist, and professor of social work and mental health of the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. She studied for many years American Polish and other immigrant family problems. And according to her, there are 4 unique identities common for any immigrants. However, here they are adapted for the Polish immigration. The first one is a Polish identity, a full rejection of being part of the new way of life in the new country, and our life in the closed culture. It's really reduced the life conditions to the closed culture ghetto, using Polish and never learning English. The second type was one-directional Canadian identity, posing to be a true Canadian, forcing children to speak English or French at home, but in heart retaining internal Polish identity, but forcing no use of Polish at household, only English. Broken English sometimes, but English. The third type was two-directional identity, Canadian and Polish, trying to live within 2 cultural circles, Canadian and Polish, and trying to reach good results. And the fourth time, which is, of course, Canadian identity, it's a natural that after some time, after a few generations, there will be full assimilation with Canadian life. Not speaking Polish anyone at home, and children raised in English or French. But some remnants of important Polish culture remained in the family life, but in some limited sense. So what is good for the new country? Is multiculturalism a good answer for the new situation of Canada in the 21st century? What is the best solution for the individual to live a full and successful life in his new country from the sociological and mental health point of view? I will leave these answers for your consideration. So I will finish with few remarks which may be very patrimonial, obvious to many of us, that the Polish-Canadians' contribution is very important. Polish Canadians, together with other open prairies for agriculture, Polish engineers and Polish scientists participated in building modern Canada since World War II. And the Polish immigrants, but also others, I believe that also Italians, they bring the same type of important factors and values like faith to God, high work ethics, and love of the family, which is extremely important. This is also important for the Polish immigrants in United States, in any other countries. They bring in these values, and this enriches the life of the new country. Thank you very much.
We will start right now the next session that will be led by Reverend Father Wojciech Kowal.
Good evening. Niech będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus. I think that I am predestined to chair this part of our symposium because it's about the Oblates, Polish missionaries in Canada. And without any further ado, I would like to present our speakers. The first one is Father Paweł Zając, provincial of the Polish province of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, who, by the way, spent a part of his life as a missionary to the north, to the Canadian north. Father Paweł has the degree of Doctor Habilitowany of History from the Institute of History of the Church of the Faculty of Theology of Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznań. And the title of his talk is Relations Between Two Religious Provinces of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate in Canada and Poland, a case of the Polish contribution to Canadian society. Father Paweł, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am very honored to be invited to this conference, and thank you, Doctor, for this kind invitation. In my presentation, I would like to focus on a particular aspect of the Polish presence in Canada, which involved constant relations with the mother country. I will refer to the collaboration between members of Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate of the Polish province, located in Poland itself, and Assumption province, located in Canada. Polish immigration to Canada and the first Polish settlements predate the presence of the Polish Oblates in the country. It was not in the milieus of immigrants in Canada that the first Polish oblate vocations were born. Towards the end of the 19th century, the only significant number of Poles belonging to the oblate congregation was to be found in Germany. And it was from there that they were sent to continue their religious formation in Ottawa. When in 1920, the independent Polish structures of the oblate congregation were created in Poland, this personal support for Canadian ministry among Polish immigrants was continued, while at the same time, some experienced religious of Polish origin working since the end of the 19th century in Canada have returned to Poland to help in creation of the new province. Between 1920 and 1956, the ministry of the Oblates of Polish and German origin among various ethnic groups of immigrants was institutionalized within the Oblate province named St. Mary's. It was from that province that the independent Polish province of Assumption was created in 1956. In the meantime, several Poles already born in Canada or who had arrived there as small children and had been educated in the country became attracted to the Oblate congregation, allowing the newly created province Assumption to acquire both Polish and Canadian characteristics. This mutuality was maintained consciously and remained a clearly defined feature of the Assumption province to this day. That such may be the case was not always obvious. After 1945, the communist regime in Poland wasn't looking favorably at the international missionary activity of the church. There was no question of sending oblates from Poland to Canada on a regular basis. Only in 1966, the provincial of Assumption province in Canada, Father Felix Kwiatkowski, went to Poland and was trying in the governmental office of church affairs, Ministerstwo do Spraw Wyznań, to receive permission for some oblates from Poland to join the missionaries working among Polish immigrants. The formalities were endless. The need of such personal support for the Polish ministry in Canada was obvious. For example, at that time, at the request of Bishop Francis Klein of Saskatoon, the Oblates had accepted a Polish parish in the city. Only in January of 1967 were the 3 oblates from Poland allowed to come to Canada. They have paved the way for the others. In November of 1967, 3 other scholastics from Poland were received in Canada and continued their studies in the scholasticate of the province of St. Mary's in Battleford, Saskatchewan. The last Polish oblate of that time to receive permission to work in Canada was Father Ryszard Kosian, accepted for ministry on a permanent basis in 1970. The growing interest in receiving Polish oblates in Canada in the late 1960s was related not only to the needs of the ministry among the Polish immigrants, but also to the crisis some Canadian oblate jurisdictions were facing in maintaining their involvements with the First Nations and Inuit in the far north. Oblate provincials in Canada wanted to assure a quality adaptation of the oblates coming from Poland to the new country. In 1971, Father Michael Smith, in dialogue with the administration of the Polish province, was suggesting that the best way of continuing this personal support for the oblate ministries in Canada would be to send over scholastics some years before their ordination, so that they could conclude their studies in Canada, learning well the language and the culture of the country. As a follow-up to this request, the scholastics Władysław Karciarz and Zbigniew Zapasek were assigned to go to Canada. All that in the middle of some uncertainties. Father Kozak, one of the first oblates sent to Canada from Poland in the late 1960s, had just left the congregation. In the correspondence exchanged between the Canadian and Polish provincials in the 1970s, the problem of vocational crisis in the church in Canada was raised quite frequently. There was hope that the oblates coming from Poland might help not only in the ministry among the Polish communities, but also in the other multicultural parishes run so far by the Canadian oblates. Several oblates from Poland actually went to Canada in the second half of 1970s, but stayed there only temporarily. The overall situation of the oblate units in Canada, including Polish Assumption Province, was far from optimistic. Approaching the end of his mandate as a provincial, Father Edward Świątek feared the worst about the future of the Polish oblate ministry in Canada. The demands of ministry were growing, and the personnel was aging. In the 1970s, 70% of the Polish oblates in Canada were above 60 years of age. The younger oblates coming from Poland were not always successful in the process of their adaptation to the new environment. Father Świątek was worried not as much about the religious structure, which for him was not an end in itself, but for the he was worrying for the members of the Polonia community, the Polish diaspora. To him, the ministry among the Poles in Canada was very much a part of the oblate charism. He was aware of some prejudices well-rooted even in Poland itself, diminishing the value of the pastoral ministry in Canada as truly oblate. He wrote in one of his letters to the Polish provincial Alfons Kubka, I'm quoting now, "Thinking about Canada, one usually thinks about the rich Canada. Indeed, Canada is rich, but not the Poles. Only the youngest generation has a great opportunity ahead. Somebody has mentioned in Poland that the ministry in Canada is not in line with the charism of our founder and does not correspond to our rule. I am sure that this is a big misunderstanding. Comparing the Poles to other nations, we are one of the poorest. And the charism of the oblates is to work among the most poor and abandoned people." And speaking about the choice of the right candidates for the ministry in Canada, he stated, "I repeat my request to strengthen us with new personnel. I would be very grateful if such selected people would really want to dedicate themselves to the work among our immigrants with their whole heart, with conviction, and not feel forced to do so or eager to seek adventure. If you would send me somebody seeking adventure or comfort, he will find many opportunities here to pursue his desires. This refers not only to the fathers coming from Poland, it is equally important to those born here in Canada. But we need dedicated missionaries. Following those requests, Father Wojciech Wojtkowiak was assigned to Canada in 1976. Father Ryszard Czepek went to Mackenzie, but after a year of experience there, he asked to be received in the Assumption province. By the end of 1970s, the approach of the exchange of personnel had changed. The Canadian Oblates suggested that not the scholastics, but only fathers with 2-3 years of pastoral experience should be invited to Canada. The issue was even discussed with Bishop Szczepan Wesoły in Rome, responsible for the worldwide pastoral care for the Polish immigrants. Instead of reporting on the names of candidates for the ministry in Canada whose names were often mentioned in the official correspondence between respective provincials, it may be useful to summarize the most important features of those letters sent and received in Poznań and in Ottawa in 1970s and 1980s. First of all, the letters of Canadian provincials confirm that the ministry of the Polish Oblates among the Polish diaspora in Canada was very much appreciated, but that it suffered from the constant lack of sufficient personnel. Despite the difficult political situation in Poland, many Oblates were willing to respond to those needs, and since 1967 several have effectively joined the Assumption province. The adaptation to the new conditions of life was not an easy task, despite the clearly Polish context of the pastoral ministry, and some Oblates eventually have decided even to leave the congregation and priesthood. It was not an overwhelming feature, however, especially when compared with the contemporary universal crisis which the Church was facing following the Second Vatican Council, with actually hundreds of priests abandoning their vocations. The growing collaboration between Poland and Canada since the late 1960s, comparable to that of the late 19th century and early decades of the 20th century, has also led to deeper reflection on the nature of the Oblate ministry in Canada. It was not a vocation of adventurers or comfort lovers, but of true servants of the poor. As early as in 1968, the Polish provincial, Father Józef Kamiński, has visited Canada at the invitation of the Canadian provincial and at the request of the Oblate Superior General, Father Leo de Châtelet. On that occasion, the two provincials broadened the horizon of their collaboration. The Polish province was to begin its missionary involvement in Cameroon, and the Canadian provincial was to offer his financial support for this endeavor, thus starting a tradition existing up to the present. Members of the Polish communities ministered to by the Oblates in Canada were able to become involved with the missionary projects in Africa, which certainly has contributed to increased self-awareness of those communities as capable to contribute to the universal church. Polish members of the parishes in Canada became proud of their involvement in missionary projects in Africa run by the Oblates from Poland. By the late 1970s, a new form of collaboration between Poland and Canada was established through the Oblate pastoral offices. In 1977, the Polish provincial Father Kupka was welcomed in Canada not only as the higher superior of the Oblate jurisdiction, but also as a missionary. He preached a series of parochial retreats. In return, Father Michael Smith, former provincial of the Assumption province, at present provincial treasurer, was welcomed in 1979 in Poland also with the purpose of preaching a series of retreats. Both initiatives were received positively, laying foundation for the current common practice of welcoming the Polish Oblate missionaries in Canada during the seasons of Lent and Advent. The statistics counted in 2007 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Assumption province spoke for themselves. Out of 54 Oblates working at that time in the structures of that province in Canada, focusing its ministry on the Polish diaspora, 34 completed all or most of their formation in Poland, with the addition of further several years of active ministry in Poland or in missionary countries outside of Europe. Out of that number, 9 Oblates began their ministry in Canada before 1986, while 25, which is almost half of the personnel, were sent there between 1986 and 2006. The growing participation on permanent basis in the Canadian ministry was due to the changing political situation in Poland, as well as to the growing awareness of the specificity of the Canadian context. The regular invitations to preach parochial missions extended to the oblates in Poland have certainly contributed to that better mutual knowledge, which has overcome earlier misunderstandings typical of the 1970s, to which I have referred previously. The Lenten retreats preached by the oblates from Poland in Canada should not be underestimated. Not only was that in several cases an occasion for an oblate to know better the reality of life of the Polish diaspora. For the Poles longing for their mother country, it was an occasion to live truly meaningful moments of patriotic and spiritual experience, which would help them to carry out their daily duties in a fruitful and constructive manner. The Polish provincials have paved the way. First, it was Father Alfons Kupka back in 1977. Father Leonard Głowacki followed in 1978, gathering on that occasion also archival material related to the ministry of the Polish Oblates in Canada. Since then, the oblate preachers from Poland in Canada have appeared regularly. An interesting document illustrating the atmosphere of this collaboration is to be found in the provincial archives in Toronto. On October 16th, 1978, the provincial father Jan Mazur was writing a letter to Polish provincial father Kupka, and he was writing the following words. Following on the feedback from pastors and the parishioners, I agree that it would be good to prepare one father to preach the Lenten retreats in 1979. His stay would be of 3 months only. It would be up to you to choose the right candidate who could respond to the needs of the Poles in Canada. And then Father was adding, I made a few minutes pause in writing this letter. It was just announced that Cardinal Karol Wojtyła has been chosen as Pope John Paul II. Wonderful, unbelievable. So he was just inviting a Polish oblate to preach the missions in 1979 when this happened. In 1979, the retreats were preached by Father Józef Kowalik. For the coming year, it was decided to have 2 Polish oblates invited, one directly from Poland, the other from Cameroon. The Canadian provincials was to choose the name from a list presented by the Polish provincial. The clear rules of the procedure were important because in the early 1980s, the administrative formalities on both sides were still complicated. The oblates in Canada wanted to inform the local communities about the program of the Lenten retreats. The parochial bulletins and the local radio were the typical means of spreading the news. Usually, the missionary preacher was not limited just to preaching sermons, but he was expected to visit elderly and sick in their homes. After the service, there were other conferences offered to specific groups, men, women, entire families, youth, etc. Sometimes the missionaries were invited and asked to bless a new home or apartment. After the retreat was completed, it was thoroughly evaluated by the pastoral team. The local pastor, with the support of his team, knowing specific needs of his community, would sometimes suggest a specific theme to be addressed or elaborated during the retreat. For example, Father Chris Pulchny in 1988 has asked of Father Henryk Thomas to focus on the idea of building the church, not as a mere organizational work of constructions, but as spiritual endeavor for the whole parish. It was in Winnipeg, and the new church was just being built there. On the other occasion, the provincial Father Antoni Mędrela was requiring of missionaries not to complain about the people's weak participation in daily devotions. He was expecting a more positive message about the riches of the Bible or liturgy in the adult and mature life of faith. Sometimes the theme of retreat was discussed during the provincial council meetings and was equal for all oblate Polish parishes in Canada. For example, in 1987, the Bishops' Synod just ended in Rome had inspired the oblates to propose the theme of lay participation in the life of the Church. Sometimes the oblates coming from Poland were able to offer specific workshops as well, such as the above-mentioned Father Thomas, a gifted musician and musicologist. The yearly evaluations of retreats preached by the guests from Poland were generally positive. However, sometimes the preacher would fail to understand the specificity of his audience. The fact that all have shared the same national background did not mean that the sermons preached easily in Poland could have been copied simply in the Canadian context. The patriotism of the Polish diaspora did not mean that all they wanted to hear were constant references to national history, politics, and moral challenges faced in the mother country. Quite often, the expressed desire was to receive a sound religious formation, free of burden of national issues and problems. It must be added that most of the time, those expectations were met by the missionaries coming from Poland. Another important form of collaboration between Poland and Canada, which was to have lasting impact on the pastoral ministry among the Polish diaspora and in Canadian society as a whole, was shared educational programs. Also, in this case, the factual partnership has begun quite early, even before the Second World War. In 1926, the Oblates in Poland took possession of the former Cistercian monastery in Obra, where they have established the major seminary of their province. Already in 1929, the scholastics of Polish origin from Canada were offered a chance to study there. It was for them an occasion to become truly acquainted with Polish culture and traditions, to perfect their mastery of the Polish language, etc. They were to benefit from this experience while back in Canada, in the Polish parishes. The outbreak of war in 1939 and the communist regime prevailing in Poland after 1945 had interrupted for many decades this promising collaboration. Thank you. Only in 1960s could we speak again of the common Polish-Canadian educational projects run by the Oblates, which have taken flesh since 1970s. The Canadian Assumption Province has helped to acquire a small house in Lublin, able to accommodate up to 4 students of the Catholic University. Some members of the Canadian province became students themselves. Many years of fruitful academic collaboration have led to the generous contribution of the Polish province, which had lasting impact on the quality of academic life in Canada. In 1991, the provincials Jan Bielecki and Chris Pulchny have decided to offer a chance to study in Canada to 2 oblate fathers from Poland, Wojciech Kluj and present here Wojciech Kowal. While Wojciech Kluj, following the period of missiological studies in Ottawa until 1996, continues his career in Poland, becoming a professor of the Catholic University in Warsaw and the president of the International Association of the Catholic Missiologists, Wojciech Kowal, in 1997, has strengthened the academic staff of the St. Paul University as a gifted canon lawyer. I will not speak more because then he will have a dealings with me again. My reflections have had the aim to broaden the perspective of the Polish contribution to Canada, focusing not on the multiform achievements of those religious members of the Congregation of the Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate who worked most of their life in Canadian parishes and missions. We work here for over 100 years, so it's a long story. We could speak of many wonderful individuals. Their dedication to the tens of thousands of Polish immigrants is undisputable. This dedication was very creative, and this creativity has involved a vision of continuing fruitful exchanges with the mother country, based on the collaboration between oblate jurisdictions, counting among themselves large numbers of Polish oblates. Since 1925, on one side of the ocean, it was the Polish province. On the other side, from 1926, it was St. Mary's province, and since 1956, the Assumption province until present. If the Polish parishioners have benefited even from temporary involvement of the missionaries coming to Canada from Poland, we could state without fear of exaggeration that Canadian society has equally benefited from the oblate dedication to the Polish-Canadian diaspora. It is only to be hoped that such collaboration will continue in the coming decades and that creativity manifested in the past will not diminish in the rapidly changing world of the 21st century. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Father Paweł. Our next speaker is Reverend Father Professor Jarosław Różański, an oblate of Mary Immaculate from Poland, the director of the Chair of Missiology of the Faculty of Theology of Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński's University in Poland, And he will speak in French, though we are going to have the English text on the screen. And the title is Les missionnaires oblats de Marie Immaculée, les prêtres et les missionnaires. Missionary Oblates of Mary Immaculate, Priests and Missionaries. Father Yaroslav.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this invitation. I have my presentation in French. Is for me better. Les remarques. Primo, l'Église catholique au Canada est devenue très tôt une institution multiculturelle. Au sein de cette Église et grâce à lui, il y avait des contacts de nombreux groupes culturels différents. Ces groupes en Europe n'étaient pas en contact. Au tournant du 19e siècle et 20e siècle, dans la prairie canadienne, les Oblats de Marie Immaculée ont mené des activités missionnaires et pastorales. Ils venaient de différents pays et parlaient des langues différentes. Secondo, l'Église canadienne a attiré tôt l'attention sur les problèmes des émigrés catholiques venant d'Europe centrale et orientale. Cela il a aidé les nouveaux arrivants à mieux s'intégrer dans la communauté locale et également a aidé de nombreux catholiques anglophones et francophones à s'ouvrir et à comprendre la nouvelle vague de nouveaux arrivants. Tertio, nous pouvons voir cette évolution dans le travail et les pensées des Oblats polonais dans l'accompagnement des émigrés polonais au Canada à la fin du XIXe siècle à aujourd'hui. Le service par les émigrés est devenu leur objet principal. D'abord, ils ont poursuivi cet objectif en Occident, chez les agriculteurs. Ensuite, ils ont continué avec l'arrivée d'autres groupes d'immigrants dans les villes, chez les ouvriers. Puis, ils se sont également ouverts pour coopérer avec d'autres oblats de pasteurs d'immigrants. Du côté de la congrégation, vous pouvez voir clairement ici un point caractéristique souligné par leur fondateur, Saint Eugène de Mazenod. Les critères de reconnaissance de la volonté de Dieu sont les besoins de l'Église et de l'homme, en particulier la grande multitude de migrants. Les Oblats de Marie Immaculée ont essayé de voir en eux le visage de Jésus, Jésus incarné dans leur vie. L'émigration polonaise du tournant du 19e et 20e siècle. Le plus grand pourcentage de l'émigration de l'époque étaient les habitants du village, généralement des paysans pauvres. Il manquait de compétences linguistiques, d'analphabétisme, d'ignorance de la culture étrangère, mais il se caractérisait aussi par une diligence extraordinaire, une religiosité sincère. Cependant, les conditions de vie les ont exposés à l'exploitation économique injuste et à la démoralisation. La plus ancienne paroisse polonaise du Canada a été fondée en 1898, la paroisse du Saint-Esprit à Winnipeg. Elle était réservée à tous les immigrants d'Europe centrale. Cette paroisse avait, sans parler des immigrants d'autres nationalités, environ 1 millier de Polonais dispersés dans la prairie. C'est aussi un nouveau modèle paroissial, basé non pas sur les frontières territoriales, mais ethniques. La paroisse Saint-Esprit comprenait des centres au Manitoba, en Saskatchewan et en Alberta, dans le diocèse de Saint-Boniface et Saint-Albert. Le premier curé de cette paroisse, composé de Polonais, de Slovaques, d'Ukrainiens et de Lamans, était le père Wojciech Kulawy. Dans une lettre à l'évêque, le père Wojciech Kulawy décrit un de ses voyages. Dans le district de Dauphin, j'ai visité 11 centres dans l'espace de 2 semaines. Pendant les 14 jours passés dans cette localité, je ne cessais de faire du ministère. Je confessais et je baptisais tous les jours. J'ai entendu 300 confessions, baptisé 43 enfants et béni 8 mariages. La paroisse du Saint-Esprit à Winnipeg est devenue le premier et principal centre pastoral des Oblats de Marie Immaculée pour l'émigration polonaise pendant beaucoup d'années. Les visites pastorales des paroissiennes ont augmenté avec l'afflux de nouveaux émigrés et de nouveaux prêtres des Oblats. Au Manitoba, en Saskatchewan et en Alberta, on a été construit beaucoup d'églises, de chapelles et de croix en bordure de la route. Dans ces lieux, on a célébré la messe et d'autres pratiques religieuses. Là, les Polonais se sont rassemblés, ont prié et se sont connus. Le service pastoral était de nature circulaire dans la région. La structure du service pastoral était basée sur la division des zones habitées par les Polonais. Cette structure était divisée en districts pastoraux. Les districts se composaient d'un certain nombre de paroisses permanentes et de nombreuses églises et chapelles affiliées. Le prêtre a également servi comme conseiller, traducteur et intermédiaire avec les autorités locales. En ces temps pionniers, les Oblats polonais ont fondé les premiers périodiques polonais, Głos Kanadyjski, La Voix canadienne, et Gazeta Katolicka, la Gazette catholique. Les Oblats polonais ont servi dans 80 centres pastoraux au Manitoba, paroisses, églises, chapelles et points d'accès. Il y avait 56 centres pastoraux en Saskatchewan. En Alberta, les Oblats polonais ont servi dans 38 centres pastoraux. Enfin, en Colombie-Britannique, les Oblats polonais ont travaillé dans 2 centres et dans la paroisse de Vancouver sont présents jusqu'à aujourd'hui. L'émigration entre la Première et la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Entre la Première et la Seconde Guerre mondiale, emplis des agriculteurs ont commencé à arriver au Canada des ouvriers et des commerçants. La réponse des Oblats polonais à la nouvelle vague de migration fut la création de nouveaux centres pastoraux, principalement dans les villes de l'Est du Canada. En 1935, les Oblats polonais ont pris la paroisse de Saint Stanislaus à Toronto. Elle jouait un rôle important dans la vie de la communauté polonaise à cette époque. Lentement, la période que l'on peut définir comme le temps des missionnaires nomades s'est lentement achevée. La période d'aumônerie urbaine a commencé. En 1944, les Oblats polonais ont analysé le fonctionnement des caisses populaires, Crédit Union. La Crédit Union est devenue un élément nécessaire de la vie et de la communauté actuelle, et il est difficile aujourd'hui d'imaginer la communauté polonaise sans l'activité de Crédit Union de Saint-Stanislas et Saint-Casimir. Parmi les Oblats polonais, il y avait aussi les Oblats canadiens d'origine polonaise. En 1902, à Edmonton, il a été ordonné par Stanislas Baderski. C'était le premier Oblat polonais qui venait du Canada. Quelques années plus tard, d'autres pères s'y sont joints. La communauté des Oblats polonais au Canada a également fourni de nouveaux Oblats de Pologne. En 1939, 37 Oblats polonais travaillaient au Canada. Ils ont géré environ 80 centres pastoraux. Oblats polonais parmi les Indiens et les Inuits. Les Oblats polonais ont également participé au travail acharné d'évangélisation des Indiens et des Inuits. Initialement, le groupe était composé de frères, à commencer par le serviteur de Dieu Antoni Kowalczyk. La Seconde Guerre mondiale a interrompu le voyage et le ministère des Oblats polonais parmi les Indiens et les Inuits. Ils ont été relancés à grande échelle à la fin des années 1980. Au total, de la fin du XIXe siècle jusqu'à aujourd'hui, 32 missionnaires polonais ont travaillé dans les missions indiennes et inuites. En 2013, l'un d'entre eux, le père Wiesław Krut, qui est devenu l'évêque du diocèse. L'émigration pendant la Seconde Guerre mondiale et peu de temps après. Après la Seconde Guerre mondiale, la structure économique et sociale de la communauté polonaise canadienne a changé fondamentalement. Les travailleurs ont gagné un avantage sur les agriculteurs. Environ 80% de l'immigration d'après s'est installée dans les villes. Les Oblats de Marie Immaculée de la paroisse Saint-Stanislaus décident de se développer davantage en faveur de vocations sacerdotales et religieuses locales. La paroisse a été fondée le lycée polonais pour la jeunesse. Cette maison d'études a aidé à éduquer de nombreux prêtres diocésains et oblats. Dans chaque paroisse, il y avait une école polonaise sans droit d'État. Le cours était facultatif. Il a amené les enfants dans la vie religieuse et nationale. L'école a été enseignée la langue polonaise, la littérature polonaise et l'histoire. Il a également apparu au Canada de générations d'origine polonaise qui sont nées, souvent ne connaissent pas la langue polonaise. Émigration aujourd'hui. Un nouveau de vaste groupe d'émigrés polonais ouvre l'émigration solidarność. Puis vint la vague d'émigration pour des raisons économiques. Cela rend la communauté polonaise au Canada très différente. Le ministère pastoral des Oblats pour la communauté polonaise tente de réconcilier tous les éléments d'histoire de l'immigration polonaise au Canada et les exigences de nos jours. Parmi organiser ce ministère, le 15 août 1956, la solennité de l'Assomption de la Bienheureuse Vierge Marie fut érigée la nouvelle province des Oblats. Cette province se concentrait sur le travail parmi les Polonais. Actuellement, la province oblate de l'Assomption de Notre-Dame gère 30 paroisses, la plupart dans le centre urbain. En dehors des paroisses, la province gère plusieurs œuvres originales, dont 3 sont particulièrement mentionnées. La première est une maison de retraite, une radio qui s'appelle Katolickie Studio Młodych et un pèlerinage annuel à pied à Midland. Dans le discours spontané, cardinal Józef Glemp a résumé la richesse de la communauté polonaise et le travail des Oblats. Il faut regarder les Polonais à l'étranger, comme ceux qui ont quelque chose à donner au monde, les richesses qui sont dans notre pays, avec les richesses de l'esprit polonais, de la foi. Les statistiques sur l'immigration sont très importantes, mais au-delà d'elles, il y a tellement de problèmes moraux et éthiques qu'on ne peut pas voir avec les statistiques. Ces besoins doivent être reconnus et répondre de manière appropriée au travail pastoral. Personnellement, je perçois les Oblats comme ceux qui sont capables de faire face à des défis difficiles et qui sont capables de voir chez les émigrés des gens qui ne veulent pas seulement gagner de l'argent, mais qui veulent aussi vivre et partager leur foi. Mais ils ont besoin d'aide. Comme un exemple de travail pastoral contemporain pour la communauté polonaise, laissez l'exemple de la paroisse de Saint-Maximilian Kolbe à Mississauga, qui a commencé en 1979. Il y a maintenant 11 000 familles dans la paroisse, plus 8 000 fidèles assistant à la messe dominicale. Dans cette paroisse, il y a l'adoration perpétuelle de Saint-Sacrement. En outre, la paroisse a un conseiller familial ouvert et le centre culturel polonais Jean-Paul II. Depuis des années a lieu chaque année le Festival de chansons religieuses. À la fin, on peut écouter.
It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 27th International Festival of Religious Song, Mississauga 2016.
I w imieniu prowincji misjonarzy Oblatów i prowincjała ojca Mariana Gila uważam festiwal, 27. Festiwal Piosenki Religijnej za otwarty. Miłego wieczoru, szczęść Boże.
Grand merci, professeur Różański, pour votre présentation. And our third speaker, and the last one in this segment, is Reverend Professor Waldemar Gliński of the Faculty of Historical and Social Sciences of Stefan Kardynał Wyszyński's University in Warsaw. And the title of his talk is The Canadian Celebrations of the Millennium of Baptism of Poland and Cardinal Karol Wojtyła's Visit to Canada, 1966-1969. Professor, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the preparation for the Millennium celebrations of Baptism of Poland began in 1954 when Archbishop Józef Gawlina was appointed by the Pope the Apostolic Protector of Polish emigration. Archbishop Gawlina initiated publication of the Sacrum Poloniae Millennium. In 1961, Gawlina formed the Central Committee for the Millennium celebrations of Baptism of Poland. In all countries where there was a significant number of Polish emigrants, the Committee for the Millennium celebrations of Baptism of Poland were established. Those cooperated with the Central Committee in Rome. This initiative also brought together Catholic activists and the authorities of immigrants' social organizations. The Polish communities in Canada endorsed the initiative. The General Assembly of Delegates of the Canadian Polish Congress in 1958 resolved to create the Millennium Committee. The Canadian Polish Congress Council in 1959 requested the Poles living in Canada for active participation in the Millennium celebrations. The Council also instructed the Congress Board to prepare the Polish Diaspora Convention to be held in May 1960. There were 200 participants at the convention, including Father Michael Smith and Father Franciszek Pluta from London. The Executive Division held the free session. In 1961, the most important decisions, however, were made in meeting in November 1961. It was then resolved to announce the money collection for the Millennium Fund. It was designed as a form of Canadian-Polish diaspora commemorations. The fund was to meet the needs of Poles living in Canada. The fund was supposed to play a significant role in the cultural development of Polish diaspora living in Canada. In 1964, the Secretary of State in Ottawa registered the Canadian Polish Millennium Fund as a charitable organization and approved its statutes. Fundraising campaign for the Millennium Fund was disparaged by Embassy of People's Republic of Poland in Canada. The embassy engaged in the smear campaign and accused the fund to drain money for the benefit of a handful of social activist spin doctors who cared only for their own interests. The People's Republic of Poland authorities set up their own Polish-Canadian Millennium Committee, which engaged in disinformation. This committee issued pamphlets which deprecated the Canadian-Polish Congress efforts. One of the issues included the Polish ambassador Zygmunt Wolniak's speech delivered in General Assembly of the Polish-Canadian Millennium Committee in Montreal in May 1962. The speech also included the idealized evaluation of the progressive Polish Democratic Association in the workers' associations in the Western provinces. The Canadian Polish Congress's authorities made endeavors to counter the disinformation and disintegration efforts by publishing their own leaflets distributed at various ceremonies. The fund collected in the Millennium Fund made it possible to organize a promotional and information campaign related to the Millennium celebrations. The fund covered the cost related to organization of the Youth Assembly of Canadian Kashubia and the credit for the executive division. The fundraising for the Millennium Fund continued. In this respect, Polish parishes with a well-established donation system and the contacts with potential donors played a vital role. Ever since it was founded, the Canadian Polish Millennium Fund financed activists of various Polish institutions and organizations, and to support education of students from Polish diaspora families. For example, in the financial years of 1969, the Millennium Fund financed 15 scholarships for Polish students and the following institutions: the Polish-Canadian Research Institute in Toronto, the Polish Scouting Association, the Board of Canadian Polish Congress, Oshawa District Board of Canadian Polish Congress, the Polish Youth Congress, After Six Club in Toronto, Biedronka Club in Montreal, Polish Mickiewicz Library in Hamilton, Polish School in Calgary, Polish School in Sudbury. In 1962, during the Toronto session of the Committee for the Millennium Celebration of Baptism of Poland, the decision was made to hold the main Millennium celebrations in Montreal, parallel to the World Expo in 1967. The Montreal District Committee was requested to initiate preparation and develop the celebrations agenda. The Montreal District Committee was granted the permission to use half of the fund raised for the Millennium Fund to finance the Millennium celebrations and participation of the Polish diaspora in the World Expo. The decision to celebrate the Millennium in Montreal as part of Expo was approved by the General Congress of the Canadian Polish Congress held in 1964. In this year, the Montreal regional committee meeting, the Millennium Celebration Committee was elected. Its main objective was to implement the December 1962 Toronto meeting's provisions. Dr. Łuczyński was elected the chairperson. In 1964, the Millennium Celebrations program was developed with the central element, erection and unveiling the Nicholas Copernicus monument. It was supposed to be displayed during the World Expo. This type of commemoration was regarded most suitable owing to the fact Nicholas Copernicus, an eminent humanist and world-renowned astronomer, was recognized as an excellent promoter of Polish Christian culture. In 1964, the framework program for the Millennium Celebrations was ready. Erection of the Nicholas Copernicus monument by Thorvaldsen was the most important event. The monument was a gift of Polish diaspora for Canada on the occasion of the millennium of Christianity in Poland and centenary of Canadian Confederation. After the exhibition, the monument was to be situated in one of Montreal's squares. The monument was to be cast with the use of the original cast kept at the Thorvaldsen Museum in Copenhagen and made to the Stasics order. In 1966, the Copernicus monument was brought to Montreal and unveiled at the 67 Expo. Representatives of the municipal authorities, the 67 Expo organizers, representatives of the Consulate of the Kingdom of Denmark, the regional authorities of Canadian Polish Congress in Montreal, and Polish diaspora organizations from Montreal, Toronto, and Cornwall, as well as many young people, were brought together for the ceremony. The television, radio, and press crews provided media and familiarized the Canadian society. These events were accompanied with cultural presentation and patriotic celebrations. The celebrations culminated with the presentation of the Nicholas Copernicus monument in Montreal in May 1968 onto the hands of Prime Minister Jean Drapeau. The Millennium Fund establishment and the display of the Nicholas Copernicus statue at 67 Expo, as well as handing the monument over as a gift from Poland for Canada on the occasion for the anniversary of Confederation of Canada, did not exhaust Millennium Celebrations program. Polish diaspora activists cared very much for raising the rank of these celebrations from the participation of Primate of Poland. Father Michael Zabrzucki, the Vicar General of Pauline Order in the USA, had been meeting with Polish church dignitaries in Rome since Adam Sapiecha times. In 1966, Father Zabrzucki invited Cardinal Wyszyński to visit the United States in order to devote the church built for Poles in Doylestown. Similar requests were sent by Polish aid committees in Canada. The Polish primate was invited to the Millennium celebrations. It was impossible for the cardinal because of the repressive policy of the communist regime against the primate. In 1966, the Undersecretary of State in the office of the Council of Ministers, Janusz Wieczorek, in his letter, informed the Bishop Zygmunt Choromański on the decision to refuse to issue a passport for the Prime of Poland, who intended to go Rome, where the Pope was to commence the Millennium of Baptism of Poland celebrations. The whole free and democratic world regarded this decision a political scandal on an international scale. In a confidential letter dated in 1969, the president of board of Canadian-Polish Congress addressed to the constituents informed that the primate replied that he could not come personally. However, he decided the highest dignitary of the Polish episcopate, Father Cardinal Karol Wojtyła. In June that year, the Canadian-Polish Congress published the information in Polish diaspora magazines Czas and Głos Polski that the invitation was sent to the primate, and the fact that Wyszyński was unable to come to Canada personally and therefore delegated Cardinal Karol Wojtyła. The security services' refusal to issue a passport for the primate Wyszyński was a plot designed to disintegrate the bishops. This action was mainly aimed against the primate of the Primate of Poland and Cardinal Karol Wojtyła. For security service officers found it a priority to drive the wedge between the two. Therefore, they spread rumor of an alleged conflict between the prime and the cardinal from Krakow. Wojtyła and Wyszyński were aware that they were the target of a state apparatus. This is the context for the communist regime passport policy. Before Cardinal Wojtyła had received invitation to visit the United States twice. However, he did not want to use this opportunity because of the refusal to issue a passport for Cardinal Wyszyński for this planned visit in the United States in 1966. The People's Republic authorities knew about Cardinal Wojtyła's visit plans to Canada and to the United States. The evidence is found in the memos of the administration section of the Central Committee of the United Workers' Party Central. This information was provided by the Embassy of the People's Republic of Poland and Bishop Bronisław Dąbrowski, who mediated the case of Cardinal Wojtyła's passport. The refusal to issue a passport to Primate Wyszyński and the issuance of passport for Wojtyła was aimed at the disintegration of relations between the hierarchs. The security service officers did not realize that Wyszyński and Wojtyła maintained excellent communication and arrangements they made for visits in Canada and the USA. According to the arrangements between the Polish Episcopate, the Canadian Episcopate and the Government of Canada, Cardinal Wojtyła's visit was scheduled for the end of August. In June and July, in preparation for the visit, the Polish community in Montreal formed the Montreal Committee, set up by Bishop Władysław Rubin. The committee of several members was chaired by Tadeusz Romer, the director of Polish Scientific Institute and the Polish Library in Montreal. The first meeting of the committee was held on 15th July 1969. The initial program for Cardinal Wojtyła's visit was developed. The visit lasted more than 2 weeks. It began in August and ended in 16 September. Karol Wojtyła visited Montreal, Quebec, Ottawa, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Toronto, Hamilton, London, Woodstock, Oshawa, Niagara-on-the-Lake. In all the places Cardinal Wojtyła visited, there were numerous meetings with Poles living in Canada, Polish diaspora activists, priests working in Polish diaspora, veterans, artists, representatives of Polish media. A very important meeting was held at Mieczysław Tara's home, president of the Montreal district, with Polish diaspora representatives. The problems of Polish Catholics were discussed at the meeting, including the Polish parish's staff and the fact that there was no Polish representative in the Catholic Church in Canada hierarchy. Tadeusz Romer wrote a letter to Bishop Władysław Rubin and recapitulated Cardinal Karol Wojtyła's visit to Canada. He conquered people's hearts. Very human approach, open and kind heart, interest in our needs and concerns, as well outstanding intelligence and oratory capabilities. It also believed that the Cardinal Wojtyła's visit and his discussions with the Canadian Episcopal Conference representatives in Rome will not remain without a positive impact on the most urgent issues related to the needs of the Canadian Polish diaspora's religious life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for your contribution. I just think that among ourselves there might be some who remember that visit of Cardinal Wojtyła to our town. There's one person. 50 years ago. Anyway, this is the time to say, well, I didn't intend that. This is the time to thank our presenters once again. You had to make it through the ocean to be with us tonight, so we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Fathers, for your presentations. Now we will go to the special presentation by Joanna Piłat from the Polish Society of Arts and Sciences abroad in London, England. Please, welcome. Let's welcome.
Of course.
I'd just like to introduce in few words our speaker from London, England. Dr. Joanna Krystyna Piłat is a historian who is working at Polish College University in London, which was created during the last Second World War as an initiative of Polish professors to keep their research abroad even during the wartime. She was member of this university and also leading the special division on research on immigration. Between 2007 and 2012, she was vice director of Institute of European Culture of Puno, and she is also member of World Research Council on Poles Abroad. She worked for many years as a voluntary member of the Institute and Museum of General Władysław Sikorski in London, England. And she was also director between 2010 and 2012 of the Polish section of the SHAPE International School in Mons, close associated to the Polish embassy in Brussels. She was also a stipendist of the Jagiellonian University in London and also in St. Mary University in Halifax, Canada. During her career also she worked in India, in New Delhi, and she published many books of the history of the Polish university abroad, and also a very interesting volume which I got as a present, as a gift, proceeding of the special conference on General Władysław Anders as a soldier and leader of the Free Poles in exile. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite our speaker to talk about Professor Oskar Halecki, our patron, and his activities as collaboration with University of Canada and also Polish Society of Arts and Sciences abroad in London. Thank you.
Thank you so much that you introduced me. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor that I can speak to you today about Oskar Halecki, one of the most known Polish historians of all time and pivotal figure in raising awareness about the role played by Central and Eastern European countries in European history, previously ignored by most historians throughout the first half of the 20th century. Halecki saw the region as separate from Russia, deeply rooted in Christian religion and integral to European history. For him, it was ultimately too less European than the West, strongly linked to Western freedoms, values, and culture. Halecki emphasized that both parts of the continent are integral in understanding the story of the continent. He shared in theory in numerous universities and institutions in Europe, USA, and Canada. He also shaped the Polish University in Exile in Paris, the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences abroad, and Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences of America, PIASA, and with Wanda Stachniewicz, he was co-founder of the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences in Canada, in Montreal, which in 1943 initially was known as a Montreal extension of the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences of America, enabling scientific exchange between Poles and Canadian scholars. Oskar Halecki names abounded in the history of many institutions, such as Polish University abroad in London, and Polish Society of Arts and Sciences abroad, Fordham University in New York, or Jesuit University of Ignatius Loyola in Rome. He was also strongly associated with the League of Nations, and which he was strongly involved from the start. Halecki was truly a unique person. So let's explore his story together in more details. Born on the 26th of May in 1891 in Vienna as a son of Austrian general and Croatian mother, but with a Polish ancestor, he recognized himself as a Polish patriot. He completed historical studies at the Jagiellonian University in Kraków, where he first obtained a PhD in 1913, and then, a few years later, was awarded a postdoctoral degree. Between 1916 and 1918, he was a lecturer and docent at the Jagiellonian University, but very quickly he gained a new position, and in 1918 was promoted to the East European History Department at Warsaw University, where he lectured until 1939. Between 1920 to 1921, he was a dean of the philosophy department, and between 1930 to 1931, the dean of the humanities department at the university. Now primarily as an historian, he was also a noted philosopher with a unique worldview who influenced numerous Polish scholars, such as Marian Kukiel, Henryk Paszkiewicz, Tadeusz Gromada, or Józef Jasnowski. During the interwar period, he was named one of experts of the Polish delegation at the Paris Peace Conference. And between 1922 to 1924, as a secretary and leading expert of the International Committee on Intellectual Cooperation of the League of Nations. This allowed him to play an important role in organizing international academic collaboration between historians and other scholars, especially between scientists from Central and Eastern European countries such as Poland. In the words of Andrzej Brzeziński, Halecki was leading expert within a League of Nations, spearheaded strengthening of intellectual relations between different countries throughout involvement of prestigious academic institutions such as Institut d'Études Slaves in Paris, the School of Slavonic Studies in London, and the Istituto per l'Europa Orientale in Rome. Friendships and contacts made during this period continued throughout the Second World War. For example, at the turn of 1939 to 1940 in Paris, where he played a key role in setting up the Polish University in Exile. The initiative of the Polish University in Exile in France was put forward by Professor Halecki at the end of September 1939. After the fall of Poland, thanks to the support from General Sikorski's cabinet, the idea of providing a university-level education to the Polish soldiers and civilians who fled Poland was implemented. A few months later, on the 1st of December 1939, in the presence of the high representatives of the governments of France and Poland, the institutions was officially inaugurated. Thanks to this, those who lost the possibility of continuation of their studies because of the outbreak of the war were given such a chance to abroad. The start of academic year took place on the 20th of January 1940. The university, led by the rector, Professor Oskar Halecki, facilitated two faculties, law and economics, as well as science. Unfortunately, the university functioned merely for 2 semesters until the end of May 1940, when its activities were suspended and later cancelled after the German troops had conquered Paris 14th of June 1940. After France had surrendered to Germany, President of the Republic of Poland, Władysław Raczkiewicz, and the government of Poland were evacuated to Great Britain. This development forced Professor Halecki to emigrate to the United States, where he was previously in 1938 as a visiting scholar of the Kościuszko Foundation. While Halecki never felt truly at home in the United States, he remained in North America for the rest of his life, like thousands of other Polish patriots who was never to return to Poland, which after the war was under communist dominance. This was largely due to his political beliefs, role played in the pre-war institutions, and strong commitment to Catholicism, but mainly because of his firm opposition to the Polish communist government, with curtailed personal freedoms and suspended elections, in the New Poland, there was no place for decent and people like Oskar Halecki, who only as an emigre could remain true to his ideals. After arriving to the United States, he continued his academic career. According to Jerzy Kłoczowski, during the wartime years and after 1945, Halecki was extremely active. For instance, he played a key role in establishing the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences in New York, where between 1942 to 1953 was the director, and then between 1953 to 1962 a chairman of this institute. Halecki worked in academia until his retirement, first at the Wrocław University, where from 1944 to 1961 he was the head of department Eastern European History, and then at Columbia University he was the adjunct professor of history, as well as a University of California in Los Angeles, and as the visiting professor at the University of Montreal, at the College of Europe, and McGill University. But he was never invited to speak at the other prestigious institutions such as Harvard or Yale, and some argue this was due to his unique opinions on Eastern Europe, negative views on Russia, as well as his very strong commitment to Catholicism. It was during this time that his idea centered around the concept of East Central Europe was beginning to crystallize. At the same time, Professor was also promoting his views on what in his world was Poland, her history, and specific its place in Europe and Western civilization. An ardent patriot, Halecki rejected Curzon Line, the Yalta Agreements, and communist ideology, which took over Poland in the aftermath of the war. While hostile to communism, he rejected stern nationalism and chauvinism. Kłoczowski described him as a person who always strove for understanding dialogue and connections between culture and people with different religion. This was reflected in his commitment to Christian humanism and its core ideas, such as human freedom and respect for tradition and religious tolerance. Religion played an important role in the professor's life. In words of David Lipsky, it was the existence of God in history. That continued to be Halecki's inspiration and is his view enriched the understanding of history. All of his students, including, for example, Professor Józef Jasnowski from the Polish University abroad, which was established again in London between 1949 and 1952, as well as colleagues from the Polish Society of Arts and Sciences abroad, such as Professor Henryk Paszkiewicz from Polish University abroad, or Professor Stanisław Bub-Tajlingo from St. Mary's University in Halifax in Nova Scotia, were fascinated by his warm personality, insightful lectures, as well as books and articles published in several languages: French, English, German, and Polish, and many more. For those who worked with studied with him, he became a great authority on the Polish-Jagiellonian period, as well as a Lithuanian and broader Eastern European history. And it was his former acquaintances and students who worked at other universities, for example in Canada or Great Britain, who ultimately promoted his achievements and his vision on Central Eastern Europe at English-speaking academic institutions and beyond. As a result, the slow process of changing perception of Eastern European has begun across America and Western Europe. Emeritus Professor George Young, a historian from St. Mary's University in Halifax in Nova Scotia, rates Halecki as the most important Polish historian, having first learned of Halecki's work from a fellow member of the Polish University abroad, Stanisław Bubtlingo, who was a professor of modern history at St. Mary's University in Halifax. As I mentioned before, Oskar Halecki, pre-war member of the Polish Academy of Learning, PAU, together with Wanda Stachowicz from Polish community in Quebec, initiated the establishment of the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences in Canada. As a section of Piazza in New York. The principals of McGill University and University de Montreal became honorary members of the Institute, which in 1976 separated from the Piazza in New York and became an autonomous public institution. Before this, Halecki had lectures on the Eastern European history in Montreal and Toronto, where he once again had influenced others who in time became his friends. One of his close friends, for example, was Tadeusz Brzeziński, the president of the Canadian Polish Congress from 1952 to 1962, and the father of Zbigniew Brzeziński, the President Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. It can't be said that thanks to this friendship, part of Halecki's vision about free Central and Eastern Europe could be heard in this part of the world as well. Another place where the views of Oskar Halecki's were celebrated was Polish University abroad, established again in 1952 by the decree of the President of the Republic of Poland in exile for the Polish ex-soldiers and officers, as well as numerous Polish refugees who refused to come back to Poland under Soviet control. Both the Polish University in exile in Paris and Polish University abroad in London had much in common: similar heritage, circumstances of its establishment, and most importantly, the academic staff and its research focus. During the inception of Polish University abroad, many of those involved in Paris remained visible mostly in the Faculty of Science, but also on each commission of Polish University abroad: law and politics, economical, scientific and mathematical, and included Oskar Halecki, Tadeusz Brzeski, Marian Kukiel, Eugeniusz Jara, as well as many others. Therefore, Polish University abroad can be regarded as a continuation of the work started in Paris, and there a true heir of the Professor Halecki's original 1939 idea of the education of Poles in the free world. However, it cannot be regarded as an actual academic entity established in 1939. Instead, the institution's starting point would be rooted in 1949, and on a much bigger scale, with efforts were taken towards setting up of the Polish Scientific Center of academic level for the Polish refugees living in Great Britain, France, Germany, Switzerland, United States, Canada, Australia, and many other countries. Without a doubt, the idea of establishing of Polish University abroad related to politics of its time. The university was regarded as an alternative to the state-owned university operating in the Communist People's Republic of Poland. It was also supposed to offer to students wide knowledge about Poland, its culture, language, history, and scientific achievements, unavailable at university abroad. The above mentioned was regarded as an important factor for boosting of the sense of the national unity. It was also supposed to create opportunities for development and scientific careers of those who, due to political reasons, could not return to Poland, facing persecution in Poland, as well as to those who were forced to flee their homeland after 1945. The Polish University Abroad working statue was drawn in December 1949. The Council of the Faculty of Science was inaugurated on the 2nd February 1951, welcoming all professors and students of scientific faculties of pre-war Poland's universities, now living abroad, not only in the UK, but also in Canada and the United States. Subsequently, to legitimize and confirm Polish University Abroad status, to relevant formal application was filed. The National Council in Exile applied to the government of Poland in exile to formally set up the Polish University Abroad, arguing that the university would grasp mainly the subjects crucial to the Polish national culture, focused professors and readers scattered throughout the world, become a blazing bonfire of knowledge. Finally, Polish University Abroad statue was approved by the government of Poland in exile on 1st September 1952. Next, on 15 December 1952, by the decree of the President of the Republic of Poland in exile, the university was granted the rights of state-owned Polish national universities. Polish University Abroad authorities, Rector, Senate, Administrative Commission, and Dean of the Faculty of Science were selected in February 1953, with first elector rector of Polish University Abroad being Professor Tadeusz Brzeski, pre-war rector of the Warsaw University. In 1955, Professor Oskar Halecki, an outstanding historian, founder of the Polish University in exile in Paris, based in New York, was offered a position of Polish University Abroad vice-rector. Oskar Halecki served in the capacity of Polish University Abroad vice-rector for many years. After the first rector of this university had passed away, his role has increased, becoming increasingly involved in institution's overall strategy, as well as the recipient of the official correspondence with requests for advice, as well as his signature on the Polish University Abroad diplomas. For example, in 1958, Professor Tadeusz Sulemirski wrote to him, this is the letter, "Professor, I am taking the liberty to request your signature as a vice-rector of our university of the priest Peszkowski's diploma. At this moment, after the death of Professor Brzeski, the new rector has not been elected yet. The meeting during which new rector is supposed to be elected and complete the composition of the Senate will take place in around 2 weeks. I am pleased to mention that Rev. Peszkowski is our first homegrown holder of the university degree, who has completed his studies at our university partially in London and partially by correspondence. Halecki, promoting the university from abroad, connected in Polish University Abroad with General Marian Kukiel, Professor Henryk Paszkiewicz, and Professor Józef Jasnowski, his previous pupil. In the January 1955, this is the letter, Professor Halecki, in the letter to Rector Polish University Abroad, wrote, "Dear Sir, thank you very much for consideration of applications of the Polish University in Paris. I am confirming that I am fully support the nomination of Docent Jasnowski for Professor of Polish University Abroad. This nomination is justified by the works that Jasnowski presented last year at the meetings of our Scientific and Arts Society, and whose broader summary appeared in Society Yearbook. The fact that Professor Halecki was a vice-rector of Polish University Abroad for several years, and that he obtained a doctorate honoris causa of this university in 1973, the year when he died, is almost unknown. But for Polish University Abroad and for the Polish Society of Arts and Sciences Abroad, it was extremely important and prestigious, because Halecki was a larger-than-life figure respected by the Polish Emigre Society. not only in the UK, but all world. Fame of Professor Halecki related not only to his books or research, but also for his deep involvement in preparing millennial celebrations in Rome. Halecki was one of the most distinguished experts involved in organizing their events. In 1964, one of the reports of the Polish Society of Arts and Sciences Abroad proudly informed that the member of this society, Professor Halecki, received from the Catholic Historical Society in America the prestigious prize for his last book, The Millennium of Europe. The society saw Halecki as one of its most distinguished members and someone who promoted its mission around the world. At the end, I would like to emphasize that Halecki, throughout his life, was a first and foremost patriot who strongly defended freedom of speech and academic independence in communist Poland controlled then by the Soviet Union. Always, with strong commitment, demanded freedom, democracy, and respect for Christian values, which he treated as something underpinning the European identity itself. For this reason, his work and even mentioning of his name was prohibited in Poland under Soviet control. And as a result, Halecki is an established historian in the West. His work, life, and achievements remain relatively unknown in his native Poland. It's strange, isn't it? His importance and influence on opposition can be seen in many public attacks made by the communists and their leaders. For example, by the first secretary of the Central Committee of the Polish United Workers and de facto ruler of the country, Władysław Gomułka, in parliament in 1966. Gomułka, during his speech, which generally speaking was aimed as an attack on Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński, the Primate of Poland, said, the reason why we refused to issue a passport for Cardinal Wyszyński was to prevent him from meeting his teacher, Professor Halecki. I think it's best to leave you with a quote by Janusz Czysek, who noted in his monography of Halecki that as a 20th century Polish historian, Oskar Halecki is the greatest and the most quoted globally, and at the same time, the last known in Poland itself. Thank you so much, and I'm very sorry for my speech, but I am very tired, and now in Europe is nearly 4 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you so much for your trip over here, as well as our other distinguished guests from Poland, from overseas. So, and thanks for this enlightening about Professor Oskar Halecki presentation. Much appreciated. So tomorrow morning we are starting between 8 and 9. Please come and see 2 exhibitions. There will be one more exhibition open in another room. Hopefully you had a chance to take a peek at this one. I think it's worthwhile, to take a look at it as well. And we will start promptly at 9 with Professor Chodakiewicz's presentation led by Liliana Gwistkowska. And then following that, there will be the presentation by the Brigadier General Williams. And of course, you have the program, so you can consult it. So thank you so much. Get some rest and come promptly between 8 and 9 tomorrow morning. Good night.